Word to the cloud. Okay, I did it right. So welcome everybody to this this first month's Nova Scribes Wellness for Visual Practitioners. My name is Lauren Green, and I will be introducing our speaker today. We'll just do a couple housekeeping things to get started. Pull up my list here because I always need my checklist. So I'll just ask you to mute yourselves if you're not talking. Feel free to chime in with questions in the chat if you'd like to, or if it seems appropriate, you can always unmute yourself and ask questions. If you ever need to unmute yourself, you can do so by pressing unmute on your computer or *6 on your phone. You can use the private chat feature. So if you're not familiar with Zoom, you can mouse over the bottom of your screen. You should see chat. So you can always message everyone, or if you're having technical difficulties, feel free to message me privately and I can help troubleshoot that with you. Let's see. You can also click around to the different videos. I'm gonna be toggling back and forth between Beth. You can probably see, you should see her, you should see Beth right now. Does everyone see her, or do you see the slides? Can you see her? I'm gonna ask Karen to unmute herself. And
I can see the slides.
I see the slides large, and I see Beth in the small area.
And Beth in the small area. Okay, I'm going to see if I can fix that so I can make Beth bigger so that you can see her demonstrate things when needed. Otherwise, we might have to do undo screen share and then have you re-share your screen if we need to. But yeah, so because there'll be some things that are demonstrated and then the content in the slides. Other things. You can click around to the other videos along the top of the screen. We'll be keeping an eye on the chat if you have questions. I already said that. And we'll also, we may send out a feedback survey or invite you to provide feedback after the call in some form. And then this will go about 90 minutes, so a little after 9, and then we can stay on if there are additional questions. So just to introduce our speaker, Beth Skubis. Actually, let me introduce Nova Scribes first. Nova Scribes is an open forum for visual practitioners. I think the folks on the phone here are members, so I don't think anybody's new, so I'll spare you the introduction to Nova Scribes. But Beth Skubis is a user experience designer and a fellow colleague of us visual practitioners. She specializes in organizational transformation and innovation systemization efforts. She does a lot with human-centered design. Actually, Beth taught me my first importance difficulty matrix. She also uses a lot of lean startup and graphic facilitation tools to make connections between ideas and people. Beth's also a yoga instructor, so we reached out to her to see if she would put together a little content, especially for us visual practitioners, on how to stay healthy and well as we do our work. So Beth, with that, let me hand it over to you to get us started.
Great, thank you, Lauren. I actually wanted to ask people who are online to just weigh in if you want to, either verbally or through chat, and just introduce yourself and tell me one thing that you're hoping to get out of tonight. Karen, do you want to start since you're the only one I can see?
Yes, absolutely. We were talking, Beth and I, earlier that I've already had a graphic recording injury where I yanked something in my upper quad. And so while as somebody who works out, I know stuff about stretching and working up and warming out generally. I'm just hoping to hear a little bit more about some things that might be especially helpful for this work.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I think ditto that. Also, I'd be interested to see or hear about, some of the things that are, I think, unique to our field. I've heard about, visual practitioners who get things like tennis elbow, things like that, or teacher's arm for writing on the blackboard, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. Anyone else? Okay.
I'm just excited to be here. Well, I'm a dancer, so I'm very interested in any parallels between the field of visual practitioners and movement in general. I have lower back issues. I sprained my ankle back in January, so that's been a long recovery. But I just had my last PT session today. Yay!
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. So yeah, definitely interested in any low back ankle tips that you might have too.
All right. Okay. So I think I should hit all of those things, but if I don't, please hop in at any time and ask questions or redirect. There is a lot more slide content here than we're going to get through tonight, but I did that intentionally, well, with the idea that I was going to be able to send out the slides, and I've hit a slight hiccup because I built this in Keynote, and apparently exporting it to PDF and Microsoft is not keeping all the content at the moment, so it's going to take a little probably time for me to figure out how to hijack the system and get the slides out to you. But there are a lot of exercises that we'll be going through, some of them today, and then more that you can explore on your own with both instructions and then also links to the source material if you have any curiosity that you want to go explore. But I wanted to start by just sort of talking about the basics. So we are, as scribes, standing a lot. I don't have to tell you that. And we are many of the injuries that come about, whether from scribing or anything else, tend to be because you're not necessarily in alignment and you're not working with the skeleton. So you tend to be overusing certain muscles and underusing other muscles. So we're going to start off by talking some about alignment, and then how you can figure out how to get your own alignment. And then moving on from there to some more awareness and strengthening exercises, and then to breathing. And then there's a second part about self-care and wellness. So after you've done the strengthening and awareness, how do you get back to, okay, I just need to take care of me after I've been standing on my feet for a few hours, or, I have the tennis elbow is starting to act up. So, pardon me for going back to the absolute basics, but posture is body mass distribution over a base of support. So if you think about yourself standing at the board or wherever you are in front of the people that you're working with, how you're standing means gravity is pressing down on you and your muscular strength is what's holding you up. If you're muscular, if you are off center, or if you're not using your skeleton the way that it was biomechanically set up to do, you're probably overusing certain muscles. So you'll be actively contracting them. And when you go to pull, or if you have pulled a muscle, a lot of times that's because you have actively contracted that muscle so much that it just cries out at some point. So you're either just going to experience fatigue and long-term stress effects, or you may incur an injury over time. So super interesting little factoid, 80% of babies are left fetal lie in third trimester, so they're laying on their left side. And science tells us that these people go on to be largely left leg weight bearing, which means that if you go to kick a ball or do something like that, it tends to be with your right foot, and you tend to be standing mostly on your left foot. If you are a dancer like Lauren, you know which side is your better side for turning. I happen to be one of the odd 20% where I'm a left leg motor dominance and a right leg weight bearing. But what that means is that I stand predominantly on my right leg, so if I'm not paying attention and I'm standing up for a number of hours, I will tend to shift my weight over onto my right leg. Something that's interesting about that is that makes, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but that makes the side that is your standing leg actually a little bit weaker, and the side that is your non-dominant standing leg a little bit tighter. And so I went cross-country skiing last month, and I was getting over an illness, so I was a little bit tired, and I kept falling, and I fell every single time over 2 days. I fell to my right side because my right side is weaker. So this is not totally new to science. The artists, for centuries have been doing what have been noted in this Contrapposto pose. And so you can see it in many of the statues that are very famous. And so here we have somebody standing on the left leg, and you can see what happens to the rest of the body. It means that your hips are shifted. It means that your shoulders and arms tend to twist off axis, and you tend to get this tilt of the head or neck. So if you're finding yourself with a chronic injury on one side, it may be coming up because of these predominant standing patterns. Any questions so far? All right. So what can we do about that now that we know a little bit about it? We need to realign ourselves and then build up a range of motion and a sense of body awareness, which is what proprioception is just a fancy word for. So I'm going to give you some exercises. We're not going to go through all of these, but I will hit one in each one of the areas. We're going to start. Oh, no, we're not going to start with that yet. I just want to tell you, you don't need any of this tonight. But for self-care, these are the things that I recommend. All of the exercises that are in here can be done with the stuff that's on the left-hand side, the basic investments. You get yourself a couple of yoga blocks. I always carry a pair of golf balls, and if you get yourself a knee-high stocking, you can put both golf balls inside the stocking and tie off the end, and lo and behold, you have a pair of golf balls that you can use for trigger point therapy that will not run off on their own, and that you can use on slippery surfaces because a golf ball will shoot out from underneath you. I get laughed at a lot for these, and then everybody wants them. I was trekking in Nepal, and people were laughing at me for carrying them with me, and then the most popular thing at the end of the evening every night was, "Can I have your golf balls?" So it's a pretty good investment. I have pairs at my desk at work, and on several of the rooms in my house, and I always travel with them too. And then you can just use a basic tennis ball for a lot of the exercises, particularly for the shoulders. Yeah, look at that, right? The shoulders and back. And then the one thing I totally forgot to put on here that I consider fairly essential, and the reason why I forgot to put it on here is because I don't have exercises that work with it, but the foam rollers that you can get. And all of these things you can get off of Amazon or Target are very basic, and the whole thing is going to cost you about 30 or 40 bucks. So it's not a huge investment. Splurges, there's a Theracane, and I actually have one.
Yeah, got that too.
Right here. Yep. There's the foam roller, and there's different squishiness of foam rollers. I tend to recommend, especially for first-time people, that you get something that's a little bit. I have the Gaiam version. It's a little bit squishier. It is a little bit more forgiving for working on your fascia, especially if you've been standing up all day and you tend to find that your the sides of your legs or around your knees tighten. If you are a runner, this is also super important. A Theracane, these are, I think, maybe about 40 bucks. You can also get these off of Amazon. They are the way to dig into your own back. And then there are little knobbies that you can use on all sorts of areas. So we actually hang this over the back of our sofa, and my husband actually uses it even more than I do. He's using stuff all the time. And then lastly, not quite lastly, but you can actually increasingly order massage balls off the web. I like this one. It's a peanut shape, and I think I got it for like 10 or 12 bucks. And it is really great for working up and down the spine. So if you've been doing a lot of shoulder work and you're finding that your upper back is really tight, rolling on this is really, really nice. And then a lot of the trigger point therapy stuff that I have included as exercises in this are all from a book called the Trigger Point Therapy Workbook. And you can also get that easily off of Amazon. So not that I'm a huge Amazon proponent, I'm just telling you it's pretty easy to find this stuff. You don't have to go to a specialty shop. All right. So
I have a question, Beth.
yes, please jump in.
On props, because my physical therapist just made me invest in one of these rolling things. I'm supposed to do like massaging, but like, do you ever use one of these?
I don't, but I do the same exact thing with my handy dandy golf balls.
Oh.
So you can actually just roll those on either side of your shin or on the sides of your knees or underneath your back or under your shoulders. I actually find the tennis balls are a lot better for shoulders, but almost everything else, golf balls, because they're a little harder and they're a lot harder and they're smaller, they tend to get into the trigger points a lot better. So tennis balls will work out the muscles, the foam roller works out the fascia, and the golf balls work out the trigger points.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. So here's an interactive that you can do, or if you're not wanting to get up and get physical tonight, you can just sort of play along. But, you know, the first question to ask is, how do I know what centered is? So now that we know that we want to be centered and that we want to have more awareness to how we're standing, particularly if we're going to be standing for quite a long time, how do we know where center is? And one of the very best ways to do that is to do a one-legged standing exercise. Actually, any one-legged and standing exercise is a great way to find your center, but this is the most, probably least athletic one. And some of these names, I just came up with them on my own. They're totally, you're not going to find them anywhere. The ones that are very scientific, you will be able to look up and find places. But one of the things I forgot to mention is that I've trained extensively in yoga therapy, particularly with Doug Keller, who's world famous in it. So there's a whole lot in here from Doug because I've trained with him quite a bit over the years. And this is one of the best exercises that I learned from him and that I've been able to pass along to people. And basically all it is you can stand, take a yoga block or on a stair, and you can stand with your hand balancing on something. And what you want to do is stand, if you already know, like for me, I know that my right leg is weaker, so that's my my right leg in this case is weaker, and so I would want to stand on that first, but you can do exercises on both sides. And so what you can do is just stand on something that's a little bit elevated. Even if you have a stool, that's totally great, and just balance with one hand, and you want to start pressing down through that standing leg until you feel that the hip points are level. So the hip points are the bony protuberances at the front of your pelvis. You can actually feel where the bones come out, where they flare. And you want to have them level. It's super helpful to have a mirror, but you can kind of get the feeling of when one is really dropped. So yeah, I can see Lauren here, and I can't tell if the computer's a little sideways, but it actually looks like your left hip is raised a little bit more than your right hip. It is. Very slightly.
I have a length difference.
Yeah, I have acquired shortness on my right side, so that's almost always shorter. And so if you press down through the standing leg and you start to even out the hips, you want to hold this for about 20 to 30 seconds. Anything more than that is going to become a little bit too hard on the standing piriformis, and it's actually going to be diminishing returns. But an extra bonus thing that you can do, particularly if you have lower back issues that a couple of you have talked about, is dangle the non-standing leg just a couple inches front and back. So it's just slowly oscillating front and back. And what that is doing is it's passively releasing the psoas on the non-standing leg. So even less than that, Lauren, because I can see you. Karen, I can't see you from the waist down, but yeah, it's really literally just an inch or two in each direction. Yep, exactly. And so if you do this for 20 or 30 seconds, it'll actually lengthen the psoas. You can't stretch the psoas muscle, so psoas tends to be the #1 bad actor in a lot of that and the piriformis tend to be the bad actors in a lot of back pain. So this would be a really great thing if you've been having back pain. And then I would do it on both sides, but you can do it a couple times on each side, or do it a couple times on your weaker side. And then make sure you take a little bit of time to stand on a flat surface after.
Oops. I'm sorry, Beth. I was muting people and I accidentally muted you. So I apologize. That was completely my bad, and it was only for a second. But if you don't have a question, if you wouldn't mind just muting yourself. That would be great. And Beth, I apologize. Would you just repeat the very end of what you were saying?
Yep. I just recommended that after you're done with the exercise to make sure that you stand and observe the effects. So tune in with the body, because part of this, as we talked about in the beginning, hey Carla, is is really building that that awareness of your body and space. So taking the time to tune in a little bit is going to be a really important part of it. Any questions so far?
Yes, please. Any tips
Yeah,
for the balance challenged? On the right side, the weak side, it's really hard for me to stand on one leg.
Yes. Yeah. So first of all, just doing this on a regular basis will start to build up. Any one-legged balance exercise will start to build up the muscular strength in that side. I have a couple more in this slide deck that'll be that you could run through 2 or 3 on a regular basis, and it will help. Yeah, it's practice. Any other questions?
Beth, you said the psoas muscle? Was I hearing that right?
Yeah, it's like it sounds like psoas, P-S-O-A-S. It's actually it's the muscle that joins both the top and bottom of the body and the front and back of the body, if you can believe that. It actually threads through from just below the diaphragm on the lower part of the spine, and it comes down and through the middle of the body and comes out as a hip flexor. And it's actually partly attached to the iliacus, which is, so it's together they're called the iliopsoas. But the iliacus is the muscle that is like a fan on the inside of your pelvis. So if you think about where those hip points are, and you can think about how the pelvis is like a bowl, the iliacus is the muscle that is against the bowl of the pelvis, and then they come together in front of your groin area and thread through as your hip flexors. So that is why if there's going to be a bad actor somewhere in your lower back, it tends to be the psoas and iliacus, because that'll show up in your hip flexors on the front. It'll show up on the lower back. So like right here. So if you're having a lot of back pain, often the culprit, it will be the psoas on this side. And there are a couple more exercises in addition to this one just to get at the psoas that I have tonight. Good question. Anyone else? All right. So I always talk about building the stance from the feet up, which makes a lot of sense since we're standing. And this pickle jar action, I'll invite you to do, and you can just do it anywhere, but you'll want to take your shoes off and probably even your socks. But just stand up and take any natural stance. In fact, I usually have people just do a little bit of marching in place to start with, and then just stop marching so that the feet come naturally underneath you. And then take the feet and move them until they're about hip width apart below the hips. And then start to think about pressing the big toe mounds down into the earth. So what you might find is that the knees begin to roll together a little bit. And you might find that your bum starts sticking out a little bit behind you. And then keeping that pressure down through the big toe mound, start to ground down through the inner part of the heel. So you're shifting the weight so it's now equally distributed on the inside of the foot between the big toe mound and the inner heel. And so you might find that your tailbone starts to come underneath you a little bit as you do that, and that the muscles in the thighs begin to engage a little bit more. And then keeping those 2 points grounded down, begin to press down through the outer heel. So you want to make sure that the inner heel isn't slipping, but you're now pressing down with 3 points. And what you might find is you are engaging the outside of the hips here. If you put your hands on the outside of the hips, you might feel them beginning to tighten as you do that, and the thighs move apart. And then lastly, keeping those 3 points together, think about extending the pinky toes to the corners of the room and then pressing down through those. So this is when we talk in yoga about grounding down through all 4 corners of the feet. This is the best way to do it. This is, again, something that I picked up from Doug Keller years ago. So I often in my classes talk about pickle jarring the action. And the reason why we talk about pickle jar is because it's a slight twist or a screw. And actually the way that the bones are all put together in the feet, if they are not twisted properly, it's like a chain and there's no tensegrity to it. And so if you begin to twist the bones slightly through this process of pressing big toe, inner heel, outer heel, pinky toe down, it actually begins to twist the bones in the feet just enough that it engages the foot. And so this is a great exercise for both people who have very high arches and people who have flat feet. Flat feet, you can actually begin, believe it or not, to build up the muscular strength you're not going to overcome your flat feet totally, but you can actually begin to raise the sole of your foot with this kind of muscular energy. And if you have, like me, a very high arch, this is going to keep you from supinating, or what's called when you roll in, which tends to happen to a lot of us with high arches. So these are things that you can think about as you're standing and you're just getting ready, or if you take a few moments between sessions, right? Can I do this little pickle jar action? The nice thing is it's engaging the feet, but also, as you just probably felt through your hips, you're actually beginning to bring your body into alignment over your feet by doing it. Any questions so far? No?
Oh, that was awesome.
All right. Okay, so you can sit down again if you like. So I'm not going to make you go through this, but I just wanted to tell you this is another exercise that if you had 2 yoga blocks, you can actually stand on them with a couple inches between them, and just that sponginess, that slight sponginess of yoga blocks will start to help activate the balance a little bit. So for you, Karen, you were asking about working on that. Also something for you, they're much more expensive, but you can get like a 1 square foot
I have one.
exercise mat. Do you? The thick one?
I was going to say balance board. I have a balance board.
Yeah, so balance board is good, but it's for it'll do slightly different things. You can buy mats, but they'll be like 50 to 70 bucks. I actually don't have one, and you can get one that's 2 to 3 inches thick. And it's just spongy enough that when you do exercises on it, it will cause you to have to do all of the correction, and that will also build up both your balance and the small muscles that help you keep it. So this is a slightly cheaper and easier way to do that, slightly less effective, but what you can see from the diagram is that when you do this on the blocks, it forces you to press up through the arch, which is the talus bone, which is the part that really needs to twist. And that works like the keystone in an arch. So once that locks into place, your whole arch will lift up. And so that will keep you healthier over time. As I mentioned, from a foot perspective, it's also going to pay dividends all the way up the leg. So once you do that, you're going to start to find that your hamstrings get less tight, and you're also bringing your body more into alignment over your feet. And then if you want to test your balance, you can bring your arms up overhead. All right, so moving from the feet, I wanted to move up to the hips and core. So as you start to bring yourself into alignment, you're going to want to move from the core so that you're not moving loosey-goosey, right? Because that's what ends up kind of showing up as chronic injuries and sometimes acute injuries. So again, if you find your hip points, if you stand up and you find your hip points just inside, or rest your 2 fingertips just inside your front hip points. So I'll do this right here, right? So take your feet about hip width apart, and you want to start thinking about consciously drawing those front hip points towards one another. And the action that you can imagine is if you had a pair of sweatpants on and you were drawing the drawstring out, what happens right through there, right? So what you're doing is there are muscles that run across your abdomen that are called the transverse abdominus. They're often called the TAs. And what you're doing when you're pulling those front hip points together is activating the TAs. And then what you want to think about is lifting from the pit of the abdomen, so from the pubic bone up to the navel. So you've got this going on side to side, and now you're lifting up through the center. As if you were trying to, you know that action when you try to zip a tight pair of pants or jeans, right? Like the thing that you have to do like this. So what you're doing there is you're engaging the rectus abdominis, which are commonly known as the 6-pack abs, which are actually probably the least important abs in the entire core. But the combination of those 2 things, and then there's a third part in the not even worry with today, is what creates what we call often in yoga and Pilates the golden circle of integrity all the way around the hips. And so when you do that, if you do the pickle jar action, so big toe, inner heel, outer heel, pinky toe, and then begin to engage the core in this way, now you are totally firm and you're probably centered. And of course, we can't stay like this all the time when we're scribing. We probably won't even think about it most of the time. But this is something that you can check in with periodically, particularly if you've been finding yourself standing on one leg while you're working, and then you get all of those chronic injuries. All right, questions? Okay. I'm not going to go over this one as much, but again, I just wanted this in the deck. This is another way to find your core, but laying down. Same sort of thing. You're going to activate the transverse abdominus and the rectus abdominis, but slightly differently because you'll be working against gravity. And then Karen, this is the other exercise that you can do. Again, I named this, but if you're standing on one leg and you draw one knee into the chest, a la Mr. Miyagi, the thing you want to make sure that you keep the knee lifted up above the hip flexor, because that'll keep the hip flexor from gripping. And then just standing there will actually begin to build that muscular strength on your standing leg. And as you find yourself building up your balance and your strength, you can begin to take the arms overhead. All right, so we've worked on the feet. We worked on centering ourselves a little bit, and then on the feet, and then on the core. Wanting to move up to the all-important shoulder girdle area, because I know this is a place that I have trouble, particularly from writing a whole lot. So now we're getting into the very scientific, not that the rest hasn't been based on science, but the very scientific exercises. And there are, in the corner of these slides, little links to videos where you can, the little 3 or 4 minute videos where you can see somebody demonstrating this as well. But the scapular car is basically a way of drawing a box with the shoulder blade. So you just want to stand in a neutral stance and then begin to tense the body. So you want to do that pickle jar action and the drawstring and zipping up the jeans so that your butt and your abs are engaged, and then make a fist with the hanging arm, and then you're going to take one arm out in front of you. Let's see if I can do this here. And so, let me see, you might not be able to see it with this shirt on. So the key thing in this exercise is that you want to be moving from the shoulder blade, because what you're trying to do is overcome, many of us, myself included, have improper firing patterns through our shoulders, and that ends up becoming pinched nerves. And actually, to your question, Brian, most tennis elbow is not actually because of elbow injuries, it's because of pinched nerves up in the shoulder or aggravated shoulder injuries. And so, and it tends to, because pain always refers down, so you end up feeling it in the elbow. I've also experienced that. And so this is one of the exercises that you can do to begin to get your shoulder strength up, but it also builds up better firing patterns. And so all you're going to do is take that arm out in front of you, and then moving from the shoulder, you just want to draw a box with the shoulder blade. So you press the extended arm forward from the shoulder, and then up towards the ear, and then back, and then down towards the pocket. And you can just do that a few times, and you can reverse. But again, it's not initiating from the hand, I'm initiating from the shoulder. So I'm really, that's why it's called scapular car. The scapula is your shoulder blade. So Karen, you can extend the outer hand flat. It's the dangling hand that you want to make into a fist. Yep. All right. And then this is a very similar exercise that you can do. And again, this is building up better health in your shoulder blade area. This is very great, particularly good for visual practitioners. Even if you're doing small scribing like this, it's all coming up from here. So glenohumeral rotation is, you can think about it as mostly like a backstroke. So you're just going to want to take the hand up and see if I can get far enough away, and then begin to, and the cues are on the screen, but you want to really inhale, then exhale, and then move. And you'll find that if you do that, inhale, exhale, you can begin to press it back more. And so as I begin to bring it behind me, see if I can drop down enough here. I want the thumb pointed down. And then as you begin to bring it down, you'll start taking the palm to the ceiling. And then flip the hand so the palm faces away from you as it comes all the way down. And then you can reverse that same thing all the way up. And then here, and then down. And do that a few times in each direction. And I should say that the first place I picked these up were from a physical therapist for my own shoulders. So I know these are good, and also have a physical therapist / trainer who has told me that these are particularly useful for those of us who do the kind of work that we're doing. And then lastly, this is also really healthy for the shoulders if you stand against a wall so that your heels touch the wall. And you're just going to make, you know, if you had a golfing grip, like you had a golf club in your hand, had to think about what that was called for a moment. I was going to say a racket. But you want to have no breaks in the wrist. So a break in the wrist would look like this. So no breaks in the wrist. Yeah, like that. And so what you're just going to do is take the arms up and place the thumbs at the temples right here, and bring the elbows to touch in front of your face, and then press your elbows back to touch the wall, and then elbows forward and touch the wall. And you can tell if you have shoulder tightness anywhere, this may be barking at you a little bit. So pay attention to your own body needs, but this is another physiotherapy exercise that you can do that's going to both start to get that firing properly and build up some strength and health in the shoulder girdle. Any questions? All right. So now that we've done the shoulders, we'll move up to the head. So most people know that human head tends to be around 10 or 12 pounds. What not everybody realizes is that every time you bring your head forward an inch, it is another 10 or 12 pounds. So you can have a 42-pound head if you've got the dowager hump, which is actually how you get a dowager hump. Like when you curled over, you see the old people who are almost bent at the waist because they actually have had to build up so much muscle mass up here just to hold their head. Somebody taught me this years ago, and I don't know why it never occurred to me before they taught me it, but your body always adjusts to keep your eye band at level. So if you are, and that's why we find ourselves, if we've been working on the computer a lot or doing scribing where we're leaning forward, your body is always adjusting to keep that eyes at level. You're not ever dropping down here. And so that's how we get that hunched over thing that tends to happen to a lot of us in modern society. And another really, obviously this is going to manifest with a lot of tension and then chronic injury over time through the neck and shoulders. So you want to, and we'll do some exercises to draw the head back on stacked over the rest of the body. But another thing is that your eye sockets are actually set back into the sphenoid bone at the center of the skull. And that will radiate any tension through the muscles through there will actually begin to radiate and show at the temples. So if you get headaches in your temples, a lot of times it might be tightness in your neck, and that might be because you're doing this, and it's actually aggravating all of those muscles. So now I've told you the problem. How do we fix it? This is a super easy exercise. So if you think, just sit where you are and take your 2 peace fingers and just place them at the back of the throat, right? And all you're going to do is draw a smile motion up to the ears. Yep. You can do it a couple times, and what you'll find is when you draw that smile motion, you probably find yourself sitting up a little bit higher, and what you're doing as well is pulling the ears into alignment with the shoulders. So a lot of us, when we talk about the crown of the head, we're not quite sure where the crown of the head is, so we're not quite sure where alignment is. This is the easiest way to get yourself in alignment. And another way that you can do it if you're in the middle of a session, although not obviously staring at the client, is to yawn. Yawning will actually open up the palate, and it does the same thing. So the cue that we use, yeah, I say yawn, and then everybody's like, oh, I gotta yawn. The cue that we use in yoga is top of the throat back and up, and all I'm doing there is just this smile motion. So the top of the throat or the palate back and up. So normally I would be here, if I go back and up. And that's drawing my head into alignment. And now my neck and shoulders are no longer carrying 42 pounds or whatever it is of head forward. Any questions? All right. So moving from the head specifically to the eyes. My ophthalmologist, I guess she is, taught me some of these exercises, and I learned some of them in a workshop that I took. But basically, your eyes, particularly, I can tell this when I've been scribing and you've been intensely looking at something, they just need a break. And a lot of times they need a break in darkness. So, so the last exercise is something that the ophthalmologist taught me about squeezing the eyes shut, and then with your eyes shut, moving the eyes from side to side behind the lids, and you can keep doing it. And what you'll find is the longer you do it, and it's starting to happen to me now, your eyes will start to water. And she says this is a really essential exercise that like everyone should be doing multiple times a day, because that is when your eyes start to water. What your eyes are doing, you're mixing the oil, the water, and the mucus that are naturally occurring in the eyes, and then putting them in a slight film over the eyes. So if you have dry eye problems, particularly if you've been staring for a long time while you're working, this is one of the best ways best things you can do to fix that. The other three exercises above it are ways to actually work out the eye socket and the eye muscles. Sorry, you can't work out the socket, obviously, but these are also really healthy things. So it's just moving the eyes on the diagonal, and then moving the eyes clockwise and counterclockwise. And what you'll find is when you start to practice, particularly with the clockwise and counterclockwise, you'll find that your eyes actually skip parts of the clock because they don't have enough fine muscle movement anymore. So you'll find that they might go from the 1 to the 3 to the 5 or something like that. And the more that you practice, you can actually get them to go all the way around the clock and all the way back. And then we call this candle gazing, sometimes as a meditation technique, but you can actually close one eye and stare at your thumb, or bring your thumb out and then stare at the thumb, and then stare like towards your nose, or stare out past the thumb to the thumb. So you're just changing the distance. Again, I find when I've been scribing for a long time, I tend to do a lot of stuff where I'm either at a distance from people, or I'm doing small things and then having to look up in an audience. And I'm finding, particularly as I age, that I'm having a harder and harder time getting my eyes to adjust, going back and forth. These are exercises that can help you overcome that. And then, as always, because I mentioned that it's super healthy for your eyes to get some darkness, one of the best exercises you can do is just rub your palms together until they're really warm. And then cup them with your eyes closed over your eyes. And just stay there for 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, whatever is good for you. And this can be also a really good thing if you have a break and you just need, and you have an event that you're doing all day. I do that kind of thing just during a break, and it feels like splashing cold water on your face. Any questions? All right. So threw a lot at you there. but that was really meant just so that you can kind of see that a lot of the injuries and issues that you may experience may be coming out of your alignment. And so there was things in there about how to find your alignment again, and then how to build up that body awareness over time and build up strength. And it's really a good thing to have that awareness of the body alignment, but it's also super important and something we don't think about a lot, to have the awareness with the breath. So one thing that, and you can do this as an exercise, or if you want, or we can just talk through it, you can actually stand up and experience how you might come in. So I go for body work, and sometimes I'll walk in and I'm not realizing that I'm being sort of observed at the time, and my neuromuscular therapist will be like, oh, well, you're collapsing. I can tell that something's going on in your body, right? And so this will affect your breathing. So if you're propping, so if this is me naturally, propping is like that military stance. So you're pressing the ground away, you're opening up the chest, right? And engaging the muscles here. And what tends to happen is that it's pulling the breath up into the chest area. So it's really hard to breathe through my belly when I'm doing this. Breathing from the ribs and from the chest. And we'll talk about what that means. And then collapsing is if this is how I would often walk into her office because I'm not feeling so great by the time I get to her, right? I'm sort of like just letting the weight collapse into the earth. And you can find that your breathing is still becoming more shallow here. It's a little bit labored because you're collapsed and there's not as much lung space. And the whole concept of yielding and all of this stuff is from Donna Farhi, who's probably the best practitioner of breathing or teacher of breathing in definitely in the yoga community and beyond. So she has a number of books, including one just called The Breathing Book, that I recommend if you're more interested in, or if you're interested in learning more. But she talks about this yielding pattern, where you're pressing the weight of the legs down. So it's that same pickle jar and engagement action. So you're pressing the weight of the bones down and then inhaling and drawing up. And so you get this sort of isostatic rebound effect. And ideally, if you've got yourself in alignment, if you're going to be standing all day, this is what you should be feeling. So if you find yourself at any point propping and you're getting that upper chest breath or collapsing, just taking a moment and trying to find that moment of yielding to the earth instead will begin to help your breathing, and that's also going to help your wellness over time. So for anyone who, this is my very crude drawing of what a diaphragm looks like. So you can think about the diaphragm as a dome shape, and it's sort of a rubber dome, and it divides the thoracic cavity where the lungs are with the abdominal cavity where all the innards are, right? And so the thing is there's sort of a muscle at the top, and the brain, when you inhale, the brain signals the muscle to contract, and it'll, or I guess maybe it's at that side, but anyway, it'll actually begin to press down like this. And so as it's pressing down, it's drawing out, the lungs sit right on top of the diaphragm, and it's actually pulling them down as it's pressing down, and that's why they expand. But of course, it's also pressing down into the belly cavity. And then once the lungs are totally full, your brain signals it to stop contracting, and then it'll come back up. And as it does that, just like letting an air out of a balloon, the lungs start to collapse and it forces the air out. So why am I telling you this? Because many of us, and I see this with most of my students, have taught ourselves when we were children, we breathe very naturally from the diaphragm. So it's the diaphragm that's actually causing the breath in and out. But as we get older, we actually condition our bodies to use the small muscles of the upper chest and neck to initiate the breath. And so that's when we talk about chest breathers. This is what we're talking about. You're actually using the chest and neck muscles in the upper back, but really through here to initiate the breath. So it's actually moving the ribs and moving the lungs through moving, and diaphragm through moving the ribs. And the reason why this is bad is, first of all, you're not getting that full pressure downward, that belly breath. You're not fully, so you're not fully filling up the lungs. And so you're more like sipping air. So you're getting like this much air instead of this much air. And that actually takes a toll over time with fatigue, with your awareness and your alertness. So if you're finding yourself really tired, particularly towards the end of a long day, actually just taking some time to do a breath exercise, and I'll show you one next, will really help. And then also it's going to tighten all of these muscles, which are of course the same things we're already using. And so that's all going to have an effect as well. So how do we fix it? This is called three-part breath. And you can do this sitting up or laying down. I just did it laying down for drawing's sake, but I teach this all the time sitting up. Three-part breath is if you place your hands on your belly and just think about as you inhale, breathing into the hands so that the belly lifts and fingers separate. And I always tell my students, you don't want to distend your belly, but at the same time, you kind of want to think about how, you know, a little kid is totally like okay with having a Buddha belly out there, like they'll breathe from their belly. You can always see their bellies come out. And then as adults, we learn to suck it in. And so we start, as you suck it in, we start breathing from up here. So regain your Buddha belly. And so just breathing from there. And then as a second part, you can take your hands on the sides of the ribs. And then inhale, breathing into them so you feel the ribs expand apart. And then as you exhale, it'll relax. Inhaling and exhaling, you'll notice you can get slightly less air this way than you can when you breathe through the belly. And then if you place the hands at the top of the chest, you can inhale and there's a lot less motion and it's a lot more labored. And it really does feel like you're sipping air, but the collarbones come apart a little bit. And so ideally what you want to be doing, or to train yourself to get into diaphragmatic breath. So three-part breath isn't the same thing as full diaphragmatic breath, but it's a really good way to get into it, is three-part breath. We're actually gonna, I often teach it putting one hand on the belly and one hand on the chest. So as you inhale, press into the belly, begin to inhale into the sides of the ribs, and then sip the air up into the chest, and then you reverse it the same way. So exhale, draw the belly in, ribs together, chest down. Inhale, belly out, ribs out, chest up, belly in, ribs in, chest down. And do that for a couple minutes at a time. And I like to point out Donna Farhi's quote here. It isn't about practicing three-part breath so that you're doing it while you're standing up and, you know, in front of clients. It's practicing it so that you can get back in touch with that diaphragmatic breathing and that deep breath. And then once you've done that, you'll start to more spontaneously keep that deep breath even when you're not thinking about it. So you don't have to be practicing three-part breath all the time, but it'll build up that muscle memory so that you won't find yourself chest breathing as often. And that's all I have to say on breathing. Any questions there? All right. Who knew that there was going to be all this? So we've talked about we're covering a lot.
This is great, Beth. This content is amazing.
Thank you. So we've talked about alignment and how to build up muscle, your muscular strength and your awareness, and we talked about how your breathing affects your alignment affects your breathing. And the thing I forgot to say is eventually, and something we practice if you are a yogi, is moving with the breath. So I find this particularly when I'm doing big things, like drawing a circle or drawing a line across, right? There's such a thing as moving tight, like if you're holding your breath and you can't quite, like your line goes up or you can't do the whole circle and you're moving with the breath, where you can actually use all of that, right? So finding a way to connect the movement with the breath becomes actually a way to become a better scribe as well. And part of that is moving from the core, of course, because it's not everything's loosey-goosey. It's everything's intact around the core, but I'm still moving with the breath. So okay, so I've got all of that, but like what I really came to this for was how do I actually take care of myself after the fact when I've been beating up on my body, right, all day. So I'll invite you to do this exercise. So you can stand up or you can sit down, but just close the eyes for a moment and just allow the breath to return to normal. And now place one hand just under the tip of the sternum. So you find that notch or the dangly bit at the end of the breastbone. Kind of keep one finger pat on there and the rest of the hand is below there. And just as you're doing your normal breathing here, feel what it feels like under the hand. And now I'll invite you to open the eyes and stare intently at something that isn't moving, doesn't matter what. And observe what happens under your hand as you stare. For most of us, it's tightened. You get a shallowness of breath, you get the muscles tightened. And now just soften the gaze. So you're not staring intently. Allow the field of vision to become wider, more peripheral. And notice what happens under your breath or under your hand. And you can go back and forth. You can stare intently at something and then soften the gaze. And so this is just a way to check in with how your body's responding to your vision as well. And as scribes, because we're so visual, we tend to be intently staring at stuff for a long time, or because a lot of the work I do is as an ethnographer, so I'm working one-on-one with people and I'm, focused on them. And so taking time out just to do this exercise just for 30 seconds or a minute in a break can help you regain your sense of deeper breath, relaxes the chest and neck, and it's something you can do. You can even do walking on the street. So it's not something that you need to be like off in a meditation room to do. All right. So moving into a more active part, if you'd like to, you can do these exercises, or we can just talk through them, whichever you like. But if you want to try anything, please feel free. So this is a series of standing stretches that you can do, again, in just a few minutes in a break or before you start or after you're finished, that will help to loosen up the shoulders and the back. So side stretch is very, demonstrate really quickly. Yeah, can't quite get far enough away. So side stretch, I'm just going to reach up overhead, grab one wrist, and lean over. And then the other way. And then chest opener, reach behind me, clasp the hands, and lift the chest. And you can release the hands and just begin to roll down. So roll the shoulders down, allow the head to dangle. Begin to roll down bone by bone, softening the knees. And when you reach the bottom, whatever that is to you, it might be that your chest is resting on your thighs. You can grab elbow to elbow and even allow them to swing side to side. And while you're down there, this isn't in the exercises, but you can release the hands down and just walk them to the outside of one hand or one foot. And then come back through center and walk the hands around to the outside of the other foot. And come back to center. And then as you're still down there, interlace the fingers behind the head and extend the thumbs up the neck. So the pinky side of the hand will be sort of on the occipital ridge, the bony part of the skull, and the thumbs will be headed up or down the neck if you were standing up, and just apply a gentle downward pressure on that ridge of the skull. So you might feel a nice stretch down the neck and upper shoulders, trapezius, those big knotty muscles. And then release the hands and let them dangle and bend the knees even more generously. Begin to tuck the tailbone. It's the only time I will ever say that. But you want to engage the abs from the pelvic bone up to the navel and begin to roll up bone by bone. The reason why that's so important is because you can actually injure your back, particularly if you already have back injuries. You aren't engaging the belly as you roll up. So that's a very basic sequence that you can incorporate, and we just ran through it in like a minute and a half. And you can obviously spend more time on different parts, but super easy to do. For us, because we're doing so much with our shoulders, this is a set of exercises that you just need a wall. This is called the shoulder clock. And all I'm going to do is stand really close, about 8 inches away from the wall, depending on your flexibility. I have really crazy flexibility in my shoulders, so don't pay attention to me, but I'm just going to put the arm up on the wall. Here you can see, and kind of cup the hand and just press into the hand. And after a couple breaths, I'll move it to the 1 o'clock. And now I'm beginning to feel that down the side body a little bit more. And 2 o'clock. And then when you get down to the 3 o'clock, Doug Keller calls this Superman. You kind of like hang out, like slouch into the wall, lean the chest forward, or move the chest away from the wall and the hips into the wall. You'll get a little bit of extra stretch. And you can actually sometimes, after I do this on students, you can sometimes see that the right arm will now be longer than the left arm. So it actually works. So I might go ahead and do this, yeah, all the way through 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, kind of sag into it, whoa, and there we go. We won't go through this exercise, but this is something you can do with just a chair. And this is again from Donna Farhi's work. So you're just like the diagram has right there, you're just gonna put the elbows on a chair. You'll be kneeling in front of the chair, and you're gonna take the hands into this prayer position, fingertips pressing into one another. And you'll just begin to walk the knees out until the back is flat. And you'll relax into this, and you'll find that you're opening up. So you really want to feel like the shoulder blades are expanding. Pull the armpits down towards the hips as you walk into it. And you'll just find that it's a particularly important exercise for these trapezius muscles that tend to get really tight on us. And you can hang out there for as long as you can take it, and then just walk the knees in to come up. And then I wanted to throw these in. We don't, this is again from that trigger point therapy workbook. If you have a handy dandy, I highly recommend having a tennis ball for this more than anything. You can actually use this on the wall. So you can stand on the wall and you can do the outer elbow. So the part right up here, where it's really like a big, thick, ropey muscle. And you just put the ball between the arm and the body and just roll it. And this is the best thing after you've been scribing. I mean, like just this, I could do this and I would be happy. But you can keep going. You can do the outer forearm. So you can face the wall, put the ball between the wall and yourself, and do it this way or behind you, which is how I've drawn it. So now I'm just rolling it up and down, essentially this part of my hand or my arm.
That hurts so bad.
Doesn't it? That when it hurts, it's because you need it. You can do this between the shoulders. So you put the ball behind the shoulder and you face away from the wall. This for me is like the place that, because I have some chronic shoulder injuries, actually swells when I'm working. So this is the best way to get into that. I can also do this laying down on the floor with a golf ball if I want to be particularly masochistic. And then the shoulder, where you're putting it behind your shoulder blade here and leaning. And you can just kind of roll. And again, that's something you can do with a body weight against the floor with a massage ball or a golf ball or a tennis ball. Those are some exercises, self-care. Again, if you put this in your kit and you're feeling like you're tightening up or you're feeling injured over time, this is amazing. These are, because again, we want to think about beginning to link movement and breath. You can, so I've gone from some standing exercises to some seated exercises. So if you're seated on the floor, you can even do this on a chair, as long as there's space behind you. You're just going to cross your arms or clasp your hands behind you. And just as we were doing in the earlier standing exercises, as you inhale, you're going to lift the chest up to the chin rather than dropping the chin to the chest. Pressing the hands away from you as far as they will go, which does not have to be far. And then as you exhale, release to neutral. And I usually do that 3 or 5 times. And then you do back body breath. So it's really about moving with the inhale and exhale. So as I was inhaling, I was pressing out, exhaling, release. Same thing with the front body breath. So I'm just going to grab one wrist and press the hands away from me. And you can feel that across the shoulder blades and the neck. And inhale, press the hands away. As you exhale, release a little. Inhaling. Exhale. Does anyone not feel this? We're good. Inhale.
Took me a second to get the inhale, exhale.
Yeah. So in general, yeah, inhale, round the back. Exhale, release to neutral. It's not always that way. Side body is hard to do in a chair. It's really, if you're sitting on the floor, just like we were doing earlier with the 3-part breath, you want to take one hand and put it on the side of the ribs, and you're just going to walk the other hand away from you so that the ribs, if you can see the camera here, are up. And you're just breathing, and you're going to feel an anchor that hip on the side where your hand is down into the earth. So you're getting a nice curve like that. Yeah. And so you inhale and breathe into that hand, and exhale, feel the ribs relax. Inhale, breathing into the hand, ribs expand. Exhale, relax and walk the hand in. You can do the other side. Hands on the other side. Inhale into the ribs. Exhale, release. If you need more of a stretch, you can always walk the hand out a little farther. Inhale. And exhale, walking back to neutral. So that's front body breath, back body breath, and side body breath. And then there's a few exercises. I picked it up in here from a physician who's also a yogi. He's written a book called Yoga is Medicine, and this is something he calls cervical cradle, which I think is really good for us in our profession. You can be seated or standing. You're just going to interlace the fingers behind the head and cradle the back of the neck. So the back of the neck, not the head, but the neck into the fingers, and then pull the elbows forward. And so you don't want to be increasing the curvature of the neck, so you don't want to be rounding like that, but you're just pulling the elbows forward. And then draw those shoulder blades down the back, so you're rooting them down and spreading them wide, not pinching them together, but spreading them wide so that the elbows can come back in, and just relax the weight of the head into the hands. The aptly named cervical cradle, and breathing here. And if you're super flexible, you may not actually feel this, but if you've been working all day, or if you're tight for any reason through the shoulders and neck, this actually will pay dividends. These also are from his book. These are wrist therapy. So the first thing that he says, and he explains this, and I don't usually go over this in my class, but just so that you guys know, because we write so much, if you look at your wrist, there's actually two sets of bands of creases in your wrist. There's one that's a deeper crease that's sort of right at the base of your palm. And then there's usually a more shallow set of creases, just a little bit, and mine is a little less than an inch down. Yeah. He says that when he sees patients who get carpal tunnel syndrome, it's because they're basically bending the wrists from outside of this area. So the part that you're supposed to be working is through between those two creases. And so this pumping the wrist action, so you're just going to take one hand and place the thumb in between, basically on the wrist crease in between those two lines, and you're just, so it's just a gentle, what you're doing is applying just a little bit of traction so that you open and lift that joint underneath the thumb, and then just bend the wrist forward and back. You okay, Karen? You got the sound off.
It just feels a little funky. I didn't realize there was a bone or whatever down there. It's kind of like popping up and down.
There's a set of bones. There's all kinds of little bones through there. Yeah. And so just make sure you keep the forearm muscles relaxed while you do this. And, you know, doing the same thing on the other side, even if it's your non-dominant hand. So this is what he calls pumping the wrist. And then you can take the hands into prayer position with the elbows dropped. So it's just sort of a natural, neutral position. Oh, come up here like this. And then begin to draw the hands down, pressing the palms of the fingertips together. I am like, again, I have like 90% mobility in my joints, and it's, trust me, catching up with me over time. So it's not a good thing. But normally for most people, this would feel like a good stretch by the time you get to here. And this is, again, something you can practice that's healthy for your wrists. And then just your common wrist rolls. And Dr. McCall doesn't call this vogue, but he calls it flexion and extension in neutral position. I call it vogue. If you interlace the fingers and take the arms so that they're in that neutral, oh, hold on 1 second here. There we go. So they're interlace the fingers and take the arms so they're in neutral so the wrists aren't broken. And I'm going to apply a little bit of traction, so I'm pulling apart on the fingers. So you can actually start to press, lift one elbow up, press in here, back through neutral with traction. So you want to apply that traction because you want to be opening up the joint a little bit, just like we did with the pumping the wrist. You can do that several times in each direction, but then you can also get really fancy. So we can do palms in, so you can see that I have my knuckles facing you. Same thing. So making sure to apply traction, so you're opening up that wrist. Yeah. And then you can also do the same thing, palms out. This is all good self-care stuff to practice, particularly for us. So trigger point therapy. I always, golf ball is your friend when it comes to trigger point therapy, because I already talked about it's harder and it's smaller and it's more likely to get into spots. So as you can see, trigger point therapy workbook literally, and I forgot to bring it in here with me, but it literally has diagrams for all the different muscles and stuff. I've sort of thrown this together for teaching purposes over time. The best way I can do, because you can do this without a golf ball right now. You can start to get into those spots. For me, the big one is right here, especially after I've been writing for a while and it kind of gets locked up, right? It's like the mother of all whatever. But a really nice sort of way, if you don't want to be massaging your own hand, nice thing to do is to take a golf ball and just place it down on a surface and cup your hand over it, and then take your other hand and press down, and then roll that sucker underneath there, and it feels really good.
Okay, now I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, those hurt like heck. Why do they hurt so much? What did I do? What am I doing?
They hurt because the trigger points are actually super tight. So it just means that your hands, I don't know why, Karen, you must use your hands for a living.
Thank.
It means your hands are probably super tight through those, and so it'll feel like basically the tighter it is, the more it's going to hurt. Or as my teacher, Doug Keller, says, the ouchy spots need to get worked the first and the most. Very scientific. So yeah, you probably, if this is really painful, it's something that you really need. And we can do the exact same thing with the feet. I will spare you looking at my foot. That's why I've drawn good diagrams. But this again, so Karen, because you mentioned the leg injury, and I said there'll be feet things coming up to pay attention to. If you can believe this, this is, when I teach this, my students call it the magic trick. If you, the first diagram, if you just grab your foot and you reach down on the inside of your foot, and there's sort of a bulge a little bit underneath the ankle bone, and if you wiggle your big toe up and down, you'll feel it. You can feel the muscle moving under your thumb there. Dig into that sucker. That is called the abductor hallucis. It is the mother of all problems in your, if you can believe this, hamstrings. And so if you spend a little time rubbing just this spot, I mean, it's nice if you can get to those other ones on the diagram, but if you just spend a little time rubbing just this spot, like if you've got a 5-minute break between sessions, it will, you can rub it a little bit now, and then just release it and stand up on both feet, and then fold forward, lean forward as if you were touching your toes. And if you are like most people, what you will feel is that not only does the quality of the contact of your foot change, like with that pickle jar motion, like you can feel more of the floor under your foot, but also, this is the bonus, you'll feel the hamstring loosen up. It actually loosens all the way up to the hamstring. So if you are finding that your hips and lower back are getting tight, spending a little bit of time on just that one spot will pay dividends. There's a secondary spot on the outside, and I always forget what this muscle is called, but it's the same thing. So you look on the, or feel around outside of the ankle bone on the outside of the foot, and if you wiggle the pinky toe up and down, you can feel that, you can rub into that. And then there are all kinds of spots, obviously, down the feet. This is where, you know, I like to spend a little bit of time rubbing with my hands, but this is where golf balls really are helpful. They're also incredibly painful, especially if you've been spending a lot of time on your feet. And I don't know anyone who does that, but if you've been spending a lot of time on your feet, taking that pair of golf balls and just sort of rolling it under your foot will be tremendously helpful, and you will find that it will loosen up not just the calves and shins, but all the way up the thighs as well. So a few more exercises. So we worked on the basically up the body. We want to work on the spine a little bit. So anybody who's a yogi will know these. They're cat-cow, and it's just, I don't think that there's any way you'll see me if I do it, but it's just like the diagram. neutral tabletop. As you do cat, you just arch the back, drop the head, drop the tailbone, and then you can do cow by the opposite, lifting up the chin and chest and lifting up the tailbone behind you. The fun part is when you really want to do some self-care with the spine, start with the tailbone. So normally when we do this exercise, we're moving from the navel or from the core. So we're lifting up from the navel and dropping down the navel. Start from the tailbone and begin to roll bone by bone all the way through the spine. And if you find that several parts move at the same time, go back and keep doing it until you can roll down each vertebrae separately and you feel it like pearls on a string. And you'll actually, it builds up a lot of health of the small interspinatus muscles, the small muscles around the spine. And it's also just super healthy for your back to do this. So even a little bit of time doing that will pay dividends. I taught a student last week this, and she was like, how did I not know about this? It's so basic. This is from physical therapy, but it's called CRP or constructive rest position, and it is literally laying on your back with your knees, about 12 to 16 inches, or knees bent, feet about 12 to 16 inches away from you. Feet are hip width apart. If you find that you're having to work to keep them hip width apart and they tend to roll out, you can take a yoga strap or even like a pair of tights or something like that and knot them around the knees just to keep them from rolling out so that you don't have to work, because that's the key thing. You don't want to be working in this position. And if you find that the knees tend to roll in, you can just slide a yoga block in between the knees so that it's keeping those knees there. And you're just going to lay there for at least 2 minutes a day. And this, when we were talking about, Brian, the psoas muscle earlier, this is the best way to, this is what physical therapists will give you to relax your psoas. So just laying there and letting gravity work and not working at this pays dividends. It's like, seems like it shouldn't be a thing, but it's a thing. So I will do this in front of the television, like lay on the floor. And actually I have a little basket with my golf balls and things, and I will actually do a lot of self-care just laying on the floor in front of the television. So then I'm kind of making use of the time. This is again for the shoulders. So if you imagine that I'm laying on my back right now, instead of sitting straight up, I'm just gonna bend my arms. These are robot arms, sometimes called cactus arms, goalpost arms. You can call them lots of things. So I'd be laying on my back like this. And all I'm going to do is start to keeping those elbows at that 90 degree from the shoulder. Start to press the arms back behind me. You may, if your shoulders are inhibited anyway, you'll start to find them tightening, or if they're inhibited, a lot of times in my students, I'll start to see them doing this because it makes it easier to get them back instead of keeping them out at 90, yeah? If they're super flexible, you can actually bring them all the way to the floor behind you, so you can see how mine will go behind my head here, and I can gently pulse them against the floor behind me. And what you're doing is, again, it's a eccentric stimulation of the muscle, so it's both long, so it's not tight, but you're also stimulating it. So it's actually really super healthy for the shoulders. And this is a trapezius stretch, and literally all it is giving yourself a hug. So you're laying on your back, you draw your knees into your chest, you reach back, and I'll turn my back to the camera here and grab the outside of your shoulder blades. Like this, you can see my shoulder blades, and just stretch, and then you can start to move your head to one side. So again, I'd be laying on my back in this case. And then the other side. And you can also slide your hands down your body as needed to sort of lengthen the stretch. But that is working these big muscles that are taking a lot of the stress of what we do every day. Many of you will be familiar with this. This is for hips. If you have knee problems, either don't do this or be careful. It tends to be okay, but if you're a first timer and you have knee problems, they don't generally recommend it unless you have somebody watching you. But this is just, I'll do it standing. See if I can get far enough away here. So I'm just going to take one hand or one foot and cross it over so it makes a figure 4. You can see like that, except I would be laying down. And then if I were in the standing version, I could squat like this. So the knees coming out to the side, and I can even draw that, thread the arms through the standing leg and draw that knee into the chest using this elbow to lever against the figure 4 part of the knee. And this is really good for.
Beth, would you like me to show that?
Sure. Have at it.
I'm going to do my good side.
Okay, you do your good side. Show off. Yep. So you can draw the knee into the chest, or Lauren, you can thread the arms through the thighs. Yeah, so underneath. So you take your, which leg do you have crossed? So that one arm goes in between your 2 legs and the other one goes around the outside of the sort of standing leg, the one that isn't bent to the side. And then you can use that elbow to press into the one.
I can see what I'm doing down here.
Yeah, I don't know if they can see, but there you go. So what I was going to say is this is super good for the hips. I didn't get into it a ton, but we talked about the psoas muscle and the iliacus. As my teacher says, the frenemy of the psoas is the piriformis. So if you've had sciatic issues or know anyone who has had sciatic issues, they are often because of the piriformis, because the sciatic nerve running down through the piriformis. Yeah. And so the piriformis and the psoas work together for you walking, and obviously standing, but mostly walking. So they cradle, the piriformis cradles your sacrum, and they're the 2 muscles that will basically swing your legs forward. Yep, there you go, piriformis. And this figure 4 stretch will work the piriformis. So we've done a couple exercises specifically for the psoas. This is a great one for the piriformis and the external rotators, which again, if you think back to the very beginning with the naked man diagram, right? If you're standing, if you have a tendency to stand on one leg, and most of us do, or shifting the weight to one side, the leg that you stand on, the piriformis and the external rotators on that one will be what we call locked long or weak. And then the ones on the other side will be tight and short. And then this is the very last thing. I'll invite you to do this. So sit in a comfortable seated position. Close your eyes. And feel your sits bones rooting down into the surface below you. Almost as if you were growing roots into the earth. And now begin to draw the crown of the head towards the ceiling. So lift with the ears, the top of the head up towards the ceiling. And begin to imagine the head as a balloon, as if it were floating up and off the body towards the sky. And the spine is just the string dangling below it. Begin to feel a release in the muscles at the base of your skull. Perhaps they soften and broaden. Maybe your chin comes down a little bit and the ears lift up a little bit. So the back of the head begins to lighten and float upwards. And soften the eyes even as they're closed. Relax the temples. Feel the collarbones slide apart. And feel the shoulder blades slide down the back. And just breathe. And then slowly bringing the awareness back to the room. You may begin to blink the eyes open. So that's a little exercise, meditation exercise that actually brings a lot of the stuff that we've worked on all together with the alignment and the eyes and the softening and the breath. And that's it for the evening. Do you have any questions?
Be sure to unmute yourself if you have any questions for Beth. Beth, that was awesome. Oh my gosh.
That was awesome.
Thank you so much.
I do have a question. You've given us a really lovely selection of things that I think we can all kind of tailor to our own needs. But as you look to either what you do yourself or what you would recommend, how would you differentiate the kind of things you might do as part of a daily practice versus the kind of things you might do on the day you're graphic recording?
Yeah, so it's going to depend on your body. Because I have chronic shoulder injuries, I actually do a lot of the self-care. I was mentioning that I leave balls down on the floor. I actually don't sit on the couch anymore to watch TV. I lay on the floor and I just work on my body a lot because my shoulder just can't do stuff anymore. And so I'll do a lot of that. I do some of the scapular work because of those shoulder injuries, right? I tend to be, because I'm a yogi and I'm already doing yoga a couple times a week, I don't need to work in some of the hip and standing stuff. So it's really going to depend on what your body needs and then what's already in your practice. But some of the stuff in the beginning, the reason why I sort of hived apart the strength and awareness from the stretch and self-care at the end was the strength and awareness. You really want to be building that stuff into your at least weekly routine. And then the self-care stuff is sort of as needed, if that makes sense. Good question.
What are your thoughts? Okay.
I was looking at Carla. Do you use essential oils as part of your practice? I don't, but I definitely know a lot of people who do. And my Pilates teacher, my Pilates teacher is like an expert in these things. So she's always like, oh, you have this going on. Here's the oil for it. Are you like that, Carla? Yeah. Yeah. So I admire that tremendously. I just don't have the knowledge base of sort of what is the right thing. I'll tend to use some lavender at the end of class because that's, a good thing. But I also have to be aware that essential oils are not good for pregnant women. And so sometimes I have students, I'm not sure what the status of my students are. So I sort of worked them out of my practice that way.
Beth, I'm curious about holding emotion in parts of your body, and I can't really think of how that impacts us as visual practitioners in particular, but I'm just curious if you can speak a little bit about how feeling and emotion manifests through our body, because that's our instrument, so we have to be aware.
Yeah. So the number one thing is the psoas. My teacher says you store all of your emotions in your psoas. Wow. And so, and you'll find actually, once you start tuning into your psoas and you figure out like where it is on the back and where it is on the front, you'll find when you've had a stressful day or you're really upset or something that it actually tightens down. It's incredibly sensitive. And that is actually, there's a lot of speculation that's why we talk about our gut feelings, or it's not just because of the limbic system. I mean, it's obviously because of the limbic system, but also the reason why we talk about doing things from the gut is because of the psoas, that it's so centered. Our emotions and the things that we can't express but we feel are so centered there.
Do you feel like, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. No, go ahead.
Do you feel like if you did psoas muscles in every facilitation that people would behave better?
There are probably, yes. There are like there are entire books and workshops. I mean, I have books in the other room and workshops that are just on the psoas because you can just work on that forever. And it does have a huge payoff. So the dangling leg exercise we did at the very beginning, the constructive rest position, and then because remember that the psoas and the piriformis work together, the figure 4 stretch are 3 of the things that you can do for yourself when you're finding that you're really emotional. And then the other thing I would note is that it does tend to express obviously in your tension in your neck and your chest and your eyes. So those eyes exercises to soften the eyes in their sockets, to give your eyes a break, to release some of the pressure that's going to come up at the temples and down through the jaw, and then some of the stuff like the cervical cradle exercise through the neck, and some of the shoulders will also help. What else can we do to release hip flexors? The easiest thing that I haven't given you would be like a runner's lunge. If you can think about, you're squatting on one knee with the other leg extended behind you, you'll find that will tend to stretch the hip flexor of the leg that's extended behind you. Yeah, there we go. Yep. Right. So if you're fairly tight, just as Lauren is demonstrating, might be enough for you. If you are locked long, so if your muscles tend to be stretched, but they're still tight, if you come all the way down on your back knee, yep, and point the back toe, yep. There we go. Yeah, and then press the weight forward so you can take both hands onto the thigh in front of you, just above the knee. If you take both hands onto the thigh from the waist, yeah, and press the weight forward. So that'll feel like something. And then if you need to go even deeper, if you lift the back knee off the floor about an inch, nope, don't tuck the toe. Yep, right on the top of the foot. Yep, there you go. Yeah, so you can tell us, Lauren, do you feel that? No? Yeah, so those are variations on hip flexor stretches that you can do. There are obviously a lot more out there, but I was trying, great demo, thank you, Lauren. But a lot of them start to get into more complicated moves. You're welcome. So any other questions? I've kept you guys. You're welcome. And I know that Lauren has a few odds and ends to wrap us up with as well.
Haha, I knew we were going to get that question. Beth, you want to explain the slide, what we're going to do with the slides?
Yeah, so we can send you the slides in Keynote right now. And we also will have a recording of this session, so you can run back through all the slides through the recording. I had a hiccup though, because I built it in Keynote, which is a Mac program, as Brian's just pointing out. When I tried to export to PDF or to Microsoft, it actually erased a lot of my text. So I've got to figure that out, and I honestly don't think I'll have a chance this week, so it might be a little bit before I'll be able to fix that. But it'd be available either as a video or a Keynote, and then I'll see what I can do.
Cool. Well, yeah, and we'll definitely get the we'll get the video up this week, especially for the folks who weren't able to sign up and weren't able to join us.
Tried that.
Saving as a PDF. Yeah, we tried that, Brian. Yeah, so we'll figure out the slides. So look for the video first, and then we'll have the slides up. But Yeah, I think, and then we can send out a feedback survey, or let's post your email, Beth, if anyone has questions.
Yeah.
I'll copy paste it. Here's Beth's email in the chat if you want to save that and ask her any questions afterwards. But I just want to say this is fantastic content, and I really hope that you have more opportunities to put this together beyond this group, because it really needs to be shared, and I can really appreciate that you've catered this to this group. So yeah, I know we need the workout video for sure. Yeah. That's awesome. And then I guess little shameless plug, Next Chain Fund. So Karen, do you want to talk briefly about your session coming up, just for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, I would love to. On April 19th, also as an online webinar, I'm going to be offering Getting Started with Visual Strategic Planning. This will be based on, I have been a strategic planning consultant and facilitator for more than 20 years, visual work for the last 4, and I am really excited to share with people some ideas for learning about the overall process. I'm seeing some templates that you could put to work, whether you are typical facilitator or not, or used to doing recording, so different ways to get into it. And we'll talk about some things about, how do you plan an agenda and a meeting, and some other practical considerations. And as part of that, we will give people some templates that they can also use to think about their own businesses. So you will have some extra bonus learning, and I'm looking forward to learning from everyone who comes to hear what your experience is and what you've done in strategic planning. So great opportunity, and hope to see as many folks as possible. Hopefully any of you that are interested, and whether it is for you or not, would love for you to let people know.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Karen. Awesome. Are there any other questions or anything else? Okay. So with that, I will say one last round of applause for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for sitting through on the late night and some technical difficulties at the beginning. So it was awesome. You're a great group.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. We appreciate it.
Everybody.
Yeah, and I know people will enjoy seeing this after as well. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Lauren, for having the idea and putting it together. You deserve
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. All right, guys, everyone have a great night.